Oh hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Blue Wizard Bakes. I'm Joe the Blue Wizard. Well, it's been a while. Yes, I am aware that it has been a very long time since I have made a video. My only excuse is that life has been a little crazy. But anyway, I figured that since I have a little bit of time, since we are on all of this virus lockdown stuff that's going on, I figured why not make a little video since I am sitting at home. Now, one of the things that I've noticed a lot of people have been talking about out there on the interwebs is the difficulty finding certain groceries and things like that. And one of the things that I saw that some people were having a difficult time finding was bread. But as I was going through my grocery stores, I noticed that even though I couldn't find bread very easily, I could find all of the things that I needed to make bread. So I'm gonna show you how to do that today. And we're gonna try something a little bit different that I kind of saw someone post on the internet and I wondered whether it would actually work. So I'm gonna try it. And that is making a loaf of bread in the crock pot. This is something I have never tried to do before, but I'm just gonna try my regular old bread recipe because the recipe that was posted with this idea seemed like a pretty standard bread recipe. So I'm gonna try my recipe that I use to make white bread and then just try to make it in the crock pot and see if it works. If it does, it can save a lot of time and a lot of steps in the actual bread making process. So why don't we head into the kitchen and get started with all of that, okay? So I'm heading into the kitchen. Of course, the first thing that we have to do is I have to practice what I preach. I always tell you guys that you should be getting all of your ingredients together at one spot before you get started. So why don't we do the same thing here? All right, so there it is. Everything that we should need to make the bread, okay? So you can see we have all these lovely little ingredients and things like that ready for us here. I hope that you guys like this sort of informal video that I'm trying to do today. It might make things just a little bit easier on me in trying to get these videos done and out for you guys. But anyway, the first thing that we have to do is actually do something on the stove really quick. So let's start doing that. All right, so I'm going to turn the oven on to sort of like a medium heat. All right, we don't need anything that we're doing right here to like boil over or anything like that. I'm gonna put a small saucepan on the heat, and then I'm going to add in half a cup of milk. I'm using skim milk here, but you can use any kind of milk that you want. The reason I'm using skim is because that was what was at the grocery store, because apparently nobody likes skim milk because that was the only milk that was there. In addition, I'm also going to add in 3 tablespoons of butter, 3 tablespoons of sugar, 1, 2, and 3, and 2 teaspoons of salt. Now the goal here is just to get the sugar that we added to be dissolved and the butter to be melted. And then once that's done, then we can take it off the heat and let it cool down to a nice lukewarm temperature. All right, so now that our milk mixture is off to the side and cooling, we can start to prove our yeast. I'm going to add 1.5 cups of warm water to the bowl of my stand mixer over here. And when I say warm water, I literally mean put your hot water tap on and let it get warm, and that's as high as it needs to go. You don't want it to be like super high heat or you're going to kill your yeast. Now, the yeast that I'm using is active dry yeast, not rapid rise or not instant yeast, okay? And so I'm gonna add in 2 packets of yeast, which is, if you're using a jar like I am, that's going to be 2 1/4 teaspoons per packet. So I'm gonna add 4.5 teaspoons in here right now. So 3, 4, and about a half, okay? Then I'm going to take and give that a quick little stir and let that sit for a second just to get the yeast a little bit moist with the water and everything and start to become active again. Let that sit for just a couple of minutes. So after a couple of minutes, you should start to notice a few little bubbles coming up from your yeast. That tells you that the yeast is good and that it's active and that it's ready to go. So now it's time to add in our first dose of flour, okay? I'm going to add in about 4.5 cups of flour for this first add of flour. We're gonna add a little bit more flour later. So that's 2 cups, 3, 4, and then about a half. Notice how I'm not being super precise with my measurements of flour, because really the measurements of flour can depend on the day and how humid it is in the air and everything like that. So I just have sort of like rough estimates as to how much flour I'm going to be using. After I add the flour in to the mixture, I'm going to then add in my milk mixture, which is now cooled down to the point where I can touch it. It should be, if you have a thermometer, it should be no warmer than about 105 degrees, okay? Because if it's warmer than that, then it could kill your yeast. Once that's done, I'm going to take and add my dough hook onto my stand mixer, and I'm going to let it go at speed 2, which is a lowish speed, for about 2 minutes, okay? You don't have to do this part with a mixer if you don't want to, or if you don't have one. You could use your hands and just knead the dough and stuff like that. I'm using a mixer because it's quick and easy, and if you have one and you have a dough hook that goes with it, why not take advantage of it? So I'm going to let that go again at speed 2 for about 2 minutes. All right, so after about 2 minutes, you'll notice that it starts to look like this, all right, where you have a nice homogeneous bit of dough, but it's still really kind of sticky, okay, and warm and stuff like that, and there's not a ton of gluten development. It falls apart really easily in the mixer, okay? So now we need to add in the rest of the flour and get ourselves kneading to make sure that everything is mixed in thoroughly and that we build up enough gluten to hold the bread together. So I'm going to add the flour in 1/2 cup increments, no more than 1.5 cups more. In fact, with the way that this dough is looking right now, I think I'll probably only add in 1/2 cup more as I'm mixing it, still on speed 2, just so that I notice that it's not sticking to the sides of the bowl anymore, and it has a nice, you know, glutinous consistency, which I'll show you when it's done. So, like I said, adding in 1.5 cup increments to the mixer while it's on speed 2 until it makes a nice homogeneous mixture. And I'll show you what that looks like when it's done. All right, so this is actually good the way that I want it right here. Okay, so you can see that the dough is, you know, nice and firm and a solid ball and stuff like that. It's got a nice texture to it and everything like that. It still needs to be kneaded for a little bit longer. I only ended up having to use that one last 1/2 cup of flour. Depending on the day, you could end up having to add another whole cup or 1.5 cups of flour to the mixture after that. It really just depends on the humidity and the moisture of the day and everything like that. But I just want to make sure to knead this until it's a nice consistency, which I'll show you after another 2 minutes of kneading, again on speed 2. If you're just doing this by hand, you're just going to keep kneading it until it gets to the consistency that I'm going to show you when it's done. So I'll see you guys back here in another 2 minutes. All right, and that's done. So this should be sort of the consistency that you're looking for. It should come off of the dough hook very easily at this stage because you've developed enough gluten and everything. The dough should be fairly smooth. It shouldn't look chunky or anything like that, and it should be nice and pliable. It actually feels really kind of nice, you know, on your hands and stuff like that, especially because the ball is still a little bit warm and everything like that. Has a nice feeling to it, a nice consistency. And this is what you're looking for when you're making just regular white sandwich bread. If you were one of those people who was making a different type of bread, like an enriched dough is what they call it, that's when you would have to do like the test where you sort of like stretch the dough and look for a window pane, if you've seen that. But you don't have to do that with regular old sandwich white bread. So the dough is done, so now let's move on to the next step. All right, kids, well, this is the part that I'm not super sure about. This is the part that I actually haven't tried before, and that is to bake the bread in a crock pot. Now, normally bread making involves doing one rise with the mixture that we just made, and then forming it into loaves and then doing another rise, but we're not gonna do that today because apparently we get to skip all of those steps by doing it in the crock pot. I'm not exactly sure how this is going to turn out, but we're going to see. And this way you'll know that if you see this on the internet again, whether it works or whether it doesn't. So let's take a look. All right, so here I have my crock pot. I have a nice like oval shaped crock pot. One of the disadvantages of this method is that of course you have to use the shape of the crock pot. You're not gonna get a nice standard looking loaf out of this. And they say that you're supposed to take your crock pot and line it with parchment paper. So let's do that. All right, so I'm just pressing the parchment paper down into the bottom of the crock pot. All right, and then I'm gonna take my nice dough ball that I've created over here, which again, I formed into a nice round ball shape, which is what they did in the demonstration that I saw. So we'll see if it works. And I'm just going to set it onto the parchment paper inside of the crock pot. And I'm gonna sort of press the paper to the sides to make sure that it's nice and flat and everything like that. And then we're supposed to basically just cover it and set it on high for 2.5 hours. All right, whether or not this is gonna work, again, your guess is as good as mine, but I figure we might as well try. Now, one of the things that I saw in this post that I read was that a good tip is to take a kitchen towel and set it over the top of the crock pot to catch any excess moisture to make it stop it from falling down onto your bread. So I am going to try that and see how it works. All right, but again, you know what? I don't like the idea of putting cloth on top of a hot crock pot, so I'm not going to do that. The lady who did her little post on Facebook didn't do it either, but she said that it was something that she had seen done. But I'm going to skip that step just because I don't feel comfortable with it. But anyway, so let's take the lid, set it on top. There it is, and set it on high for 2.5 hours. I am going to actually check it after 2 hours and see how it looks. And then if it needs to go for another half hour, then I will do that. But I'll let you know in 2 hours what it looks like. All right, here we go. So it's officially been 2 hours at this point. As you can see, I saw a lot of moisture collecting on the surface of my top of my lid over here. And so I actually did make the decision to put the cloth on there as it is, okay? So let's take it off and see what it looks like. All right, well, first thing that I'm noticing is that it doesn't look like a nicely baked loaf of bread. It's not like brown on the top or anything like that. But to see whether it's done inside, we have to check. We should be seeing an internal temperature of around 200 degrees. Oh, and we got there. Very good. Okay, so it looks like the bread is baked. Now, one of the things that they suggested was that you can actually take the bread and throw it into the oven on broil just to get it to brown a little bit more if you were finding that your bread wasn't looking the way that you wanted. So maybe I'll do that. I'll throw it into the oven on broil for a couple of minutes to see whether we just brown the top a little bit. And then we'll take a look and see what it looks like at that point. As you can see, it actually did brown on the bottom and on the sides of the loaf. It just didn't brown on the top. So all I'm gonna do is throw it into the oven just to get it to brown on the top a little bit more. And so I have the broiler set to high, and so I'm just gonna take the bread and throw it in, which I apparently cannot do while I'm holding the camera. So here we go. All right, it's kind of hot, but I have asbestos hands. All right. So I'm just going to throw that in there for a couple of minutes and keep an eye on it, and then we'll see whether it browns in the oven or not. I guess we'll find out soon. I'll let you know. All right, so it's been about 5 minutes, so let's take a look and see what it looks like. Not bad. It's got a little bit of brown on top. I think that's enough, okay? So I'm gonna let it cool now just for a couple of hours, and then we'll take a taste and see if it's any good. All right, guys, so here's the loaf. I will say it is not the prettiest loaf of bread that I have ever made. However, I think that it looks pretty good for the ease that I went through to make it. But of course, the proof is in the taste. So let's take and cut her open and see what it tastes like. Now, one of the important things to remember is that this recipe for bread normally makes 2 loaves of bread instead of just 1. So I'm gonna cut this in half and then have the 2 halves as 2 separate loaves of bread that I'll eat at 2 different, times and stuff like that. And the way that I store my bread to keep it freshest for the longest is I always take and wrap it in 1 layer of plastic cling film and then 1 layer of aluminum foil and then throw it in the freezer, and it lasts for a really long time in the freezer that way. And when you thaw it out, it actually tastes pretty fresh. I mean, not like fresh baked, but still pretty fresh. So anyway, that's how I store it. It actually looks pretty good on the inside. If you take a look and see there, okay, you've got sort of a nice crumb to it and everything. It feels nice and soft. All right, and it's still a little bit warm, so I'm just gonna cut 1 slice of it here. Here we go. Guys, I have to say, I am really kind of shocked. I'll be honest, I did not think that this recipe was gonna work as well as it did. I will say, again, it is not the best loaf of bread that I've ever made, but if you are looking not to necessarily impress people, but you're just looking to get bread in the house, and you're looking for a quick and easy way to get fresh homemade bread in your house, this is a really, really easy way to do it, and this bread is pretty gosh darn good. I would definitely give this, this recipe, this method for making bread at home, 2 thumbs up, especially because, like I said, it is like super easy to do. Well, guys, I think that today was kind of a fun little food adventure, trying something new in the kitchen today, which I encourage all of you guys to do. You should always try new things, especially when it comes to food, because how do you know that you're gonna like something or can do something unless you try it? That's one of the reasons why I like to make these videos, is to show you that it's really not as difficult as a lot of people think to make good food at home. Which is obviously evidenced by this fantastic tasting bread. Guys, I really cannot tell you how amazed and how impressed I am by how well that this bread worked. I really think that you guys should try it, especially if this is your first time making bread. It's gonna get you used to the method of just putting the dough together without having to stress about actually, putting together a loaf and everything like that. It works really, really well. Guys, I'm really impressed. Well, anyway, if you liked this video and you want to see more like it, please make sure that you hit the like button down below this video. Also, please make sure to hit the subscribe button as well as the little bell for notifications so that you're notified every time that I post a new video. If you would like to see a video where I show you how I normally make bread, where I actually put together a loaf and everything like that, let me know in the comments down below. Also in the comments, you could let me know if there's any questions that you have about this recipe or any other recipe. Don't forget also that you can find me on social media at both Instagram and Twitter at the handle @JoeTheBlueWhiz, where you can ask me questions, interact with me, see any posts of bakes that I'm doing or cooks that I'm doing now, as well as share with me any pictures of bakes and cooks that you do. I would love to see anything that you guys are making, especially if you make any of the recipes that I'm making here in my videos. Well, I'm gonna go finish this slice of bread and wrap up the rest of my loaves. But until next time, guys, remember, you don't have to be a professional chef or even a wizard in order to make magic in your kitchen.